There could be major changes coming to the Dominican Republic's tourism industry. Last night, President Abinader said he was suggesting a 30% wage increase for Dominican tourism workers. Here's why. If you watched my previous video, then you know what's been happening in Punta Cana with the protest marches against illegal Haitian immigration. Also, the issue of undocumented Haitian migrants taking over the biggest resort area in the country, Punta Cana, Bávaro, and Friusa, as well as some of the issues related to safety and the presence of potentially gangs in these pockets of Friusa, and how Dominicans are now completely fed up with the situation and are demanding accountability from their government. They're also speaking up about tourism and how many of the construction workers in the area who've been profiting from projects related to resorts and residences, etc., have been hiring undocumented migrant workers for years, and no one has ever batted an eye. Following these marches, President Abinader last night seems to have understood that this is not an issue that is going away, that Dominicans are finally coming together on this and demanding better. And he made a speech to the nation and introduced 15 measures to control illegal immigration from Haiti. And one of the measures that he's suggesting is to make tourism more attractive. Basically, it's part of a broader plan to Dominicanize the tourism industry in the Dominican Republic by offering a 30% salary increase. Hold off on that 30% for now. Just think about the word Dominicanization of Dominican tourism. I mean, if you stop and think about that for a minute, it's really quite shocking that you are in the Dominican Republic, but you have to Dominicanize your tourism industry. And that is because the majority now of many of the tourism jobs, as well as the informal jobs, construction jobs that are related to tourism, are held by undocumented Haitian workers. So it's come to the point where tourism has to be made more attractive to Dominicans. Why? Well, first of all, the salaries are extremely low. Not only that, but also the conditions haven't always been favorable. Like, the treatment of workers has always been horrendous or not favorable. It doesn't take much to find that out. You can talk to resort workers. Some of them are happy with their jobs, but the majority will tell you that it's no picnic. And when I say low wage in tourism resorts, I have talked to several off the record while I was there doing my book over the many years, and have been told by more than one that, you're lucky if you make $200 or $250 a month as a server, and you're more likely to make it just a little bit more as a reception desk attendant, a reservations desk person. So now the suggestion is that increasing the wages for tourism workers will encourage Dominicans to join the industry and to re-Dominicanize tourism in the DR. Let's think about that for a second. 30%. 30% of very little. I'm just saying, it's not much, especially when you consider that we live in times of inflation since the pandemic. And it also begs the question, why wasn't this done earlier? The Dominican Republic's tourism industry has been on a vertiginous ascent for more than a decade. All you have to do is just look at the numbers. In 2019, the DR had 6.4 million tourists, and tourism revenue reached $7 billion, or 8.4% of the country's gross national product. Fast forward to 2025, 11 million visitors, of which 1.4 are Dominicans abroad, but still 26 billion in revenue brought into the GDP, and tourism accounting for nearly 20% of the nation's economy. But yet, you waited all these years. I mean, even though he wasn't in power before, but the government itself as a whole waited all of this time to consider giving an increase to tourism workers' salaries and make the jobs more attractive. I want to go over some of the words that the president of the Dominican Republic said during his speech related to tourism. For too long, agriculture and construction have depended on illegal labor. I thought it was very interesting that he actually just admitted this out front. And then he says, the concern about the job losses for our citizens caused by irregular migration cannot be ignored or minimized. Therefore, he's now going to promote the Dominicanization of employment by promoting a 30% increase in the tourism sector. And then he says, because when work is valued and well paid, it attracts people. It not only attracts people, it also means you have a livable wage. It also means that you're able to afford more things for you and your family and your kids. It means you can also buy land and afford your own home. That's not the case today for many, many, many Dominicans who are low-wage income earners, including in the resort tourism world. Another thing is, he makes it sound like it's something new, but in fact, this Dominicanization of tourism workers and staff in resorts is really just meaning that he's going to start enforcing a law that was already in the books. Under the Dominican Labor Code, specifically Article 135, there is a specific law that is called the 80-20 rule. It requires that at least 80% of a company's workforce must be Dominican nationals. Only 20% of employees can be foreigners. This applies to all private sector businesses, including tourism and hospitality companies. Now, obviously, this law has not been observed in the hospitality, construction world, industries. And so now what the President of the Dominican Republic is saying is that the law is going to be enforced. So as I said, why now? Why didn't you do it all these years? Secondly, is it really going to change lives for tourism workers? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Another thing I'm thinking about is that perhaps this wave of change that's coming in tourism when it comes to a Caribbean destination means that other Caribbean destinations will also feel the pressure potentially, because this is certainly not unique to the Dominican Republic that wages are low in tourism, despite the fact that you might be staying in a 5-star resort or a 4-star resort or whatever it is. Wages are just ridiculously low for what you get, and so it's a topic that the tourism industry loves to just shove under the carpet and ignore. But now with the Dominican Republic facing this sort of mix of migration issue, illegal migration with tourism, construction, and how it's funded its tourism industry, it's really bringing to the forefront the issue of poverty wage jobs and taking advantage of low-income populations to make a profit, whether they're Haitian or Dominican. And so maybe, just maybe, this will put pressure on other governments in the Caribbean to rethink their salary levels for tourism workers. The other question that comes up is who's going to absorb the cost of this increase when it comes, when it becomes effective? Because it isn't yet, this is just a proposal. But is it going to be passed on to the consumer, or are companies going to absorb this? Now, this also brings up the fact that when you make a livable wage, obviously, as I said, you're able to afford your own place, your own land, you can buy in your home country. It really makes me think about a similar island where real estate incentives and tourism incentives are granted to foreign entities and foreign citizens, while the residents of the place don't have the same opportunities, don't have the same capital power, they can't invest in the way that foreigners can, and they don't have the breaks. They don't even come close to having that kind of break. And so, I don't know, it kind of makes me think of Puerto Rico, where mainlanders from the US, millionaires and such, have been given huge incentives to buy coastal land for the purpose of tourism or other. I don't know that this is something that people talk about or think about, but personally I have thought about it many, many times when I was there. And seeing now, especially after the pandemic, as people, Americans even, consider moving abroad and are considering other places to live, including the Dominican Republic, and buying property and buying coastal lands and buying really prime real estate, others making entire businesses of selling to foreigners, it just makes me wonder, is that where the DR is headed? Or are Dominicans going to push back and establish themselves further? Just as we've seen now is the beginning with the protests against illegal migration taking over many of the opportunities in the country. Are we going to see that prevent the next phase of most of the land being given away to others? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments and how you see the future evolving for tourism in the Dominican Republic, for ownership, because really it's not about salaries, is it? This is about ownership. This is a fight for ownership. And I think that is the core of the issue, and the root of the problem really doesn't even start with tourism. The root of the problem starts with how to manage the Haiti crisis and preventing it from further impacting day-to-day life in the Dominican Republic. After that, you can talk about tourism, but not before. Let me know what you think. Thanks so much for listening, and I will see you on the next episode. Take care, guys.